Good morning. Welcome to the post-Thanksgiving NBA Strategy Show. With me, as always, is Matt Meiselman. He has done excellent work on DraftKings show called The Slate. He's done phenomenal work on his own podcast called Studying the Sharps. I am Mike G. I've done reasonable work with spreadsheets. Matt, let's jump straight into an actionable betting game situation today. Some fun things to talk about all the players on the tanking Spurs that have a greater impact on the spread than LeBron James. But let's go straight to San Antonio, LA. What are you seeing? What's the model saying? What are we recommending?
Okay, yeah, no recap from yesterday because we had no basketball, which was a shame because football is just objectively worse as a sport. Yeah, the LeBron impact has been weird. So this is one game where the line is already moved, but just to give like the macro level context for it, the Spurs have been really, really awful lately, and the Lakers before losing to Phoenix were on somewhat of a winning streak. They did it against the Spurs and the Pistons, the Brooklyn Nets on a back-to-back. Almost got a win against Sacramento. We can debate Sacramento later. We will certainly come back to them. But the point is, the Lakers have played well recently, or have seemed to play well. The Spurs have not. And on top of that, LeBron was not active for most of this Lakers winning streak. I think actually he wasn't active for all of it. So LeBron is expected to return. We have him technically listed questionable tonight, but reports are that he'll be back. Minutes limit or something, we have no idea. If anything, I would guess that's pretty mild. But LeBron is expected to play. I do have him listed here just in case. But even with that, the Lakers are only projected to be 1 point favorites in this game. And current betting lines are around 3.5. I think there may be a +4 somewhere. But yeah, the Spurs look undervalued. And I think it's pretty obvious why, just because they've been so horrible in recent games. Um, the best player on the San Antonio Spurs is probably Jakob Poeltl. And in their most recent matchup against the Lakers, he didn't play. And Anthony Davis just destroyed whoever was trying to guard him with Poeltl not there. The Spurs' second best center is probably Gorgie Jang, and he doesn't play big minutes. So they're using like Charles Bassey and they're using undersized lineups, and it's a matchup nightmare for Davis. But Poeltl is a really good defender. Trey Jones is good. Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell are probably average players. And the Spurs actually have a semi-competent starting lineup. The problem
Mm-hmm.
is if any of those players is not available, the bench has some of the worst guys in the league. So the
Gotcha.
version of the Spurs we're getting tonight is bad. For sure it's bad, but it's not tanking bad. It's a team that should miss the playoffs, but they're not the worst team in the league.
Gotcha. All right. And so when we talk about players that have a greater impact on the spread, than LeBron, the guys you mentioned, Devin Vassell, Pirtle, maybe even Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, definitely. It's not just that they have slightly positive player ratings. It's when they're off and their backups come in. The backups are so bad that's really where the spread impact is.
Yeah, let me see if
So
I can I'm going to pull up the Spurs roster here cuz it's kind of amusing to can we see the whole screen here? We're a little bit cut off. So maybe this isn't the best way to show it, but um
yeah, I mean, as you're pulling that up, so Pirtle, I've actually heard some interesting talk. Like there's the actual debate about whether the Warriors should trade Wiseman for Pirtle, like even just in the straight up. Does that make them better now? Does that give them a chance to maybe make some noise where they're a little shallow right now? Do the Warriors actually it'd be quite a hit to their pride for them to do to trade a number 2 pick from just 2.5 years ago for Pirtle? But there's little argument that right now it actually would make them better. Five
for
years from
sure.
now, who knows? But so anyway, yeah. So Pirtle is a serviceable player.
Yeah.
Um,
And a guy who almost certainly will get traded at some point this year, right?
right,
Maybe the Warriors, maybe somewhere else. Toronto, I think, is a like
right.
a
All right.
nice.
So you're liking this at +3.5.
Yeah, I
And
don't love it though. So, full disclosure here, and we can kind of cover this idea for some other games. On Wednesday night, I only had basically my intuition to get some bets in when the opening lines came out. I have an idea in my head of, what the rating for each team is, and I have a rough idea of what the travel adjustments would be. And the Spurs opened at plus 5.5.
Okay.
I didn't bet as much as I normally would because I didn't have the validation, like the full validation of having the rating set up. I just set this up this morning. It turns out I probably should have been more aggressive on the plus 5.5 and the plus 5. I think part of the reason this line has moved this morning is because Pat Bev is not going to be playing. He got suspended for the DeAndre Ayton thing. So the Lakers a lot of people would say they're better off without him, but he's the one guy on that team as far as the perimeter players that plays real defense. Austin Reeves sometimes, but like having to have Lonnie Walker play extra minutes and Kendrick Nunn, like it's much better if they can have Patrick Beverley on the court for defense. So I think that's moved the line a bit, and I think sharps have come in and been like, this is crazy. The Lakers are playing better, but they are not good enough to be 5-point road favorites against anybody.
Gotcha. All right. So at plus 3.5, is it a bet? Is it?
I think it's still a bet. What I will say though is you can probably optimize around the LeBron news. So if LeBron is ruled out, this line could end up being like plus 1. Okay. I think that's the unlikely thing though, because LeBron is mostly expected to play. But when we get final confirmation that LeBron is in, there might be a 4 or 4.5 available. So it is a bet at 3.5, but I think there are ways to 3.5 without LeBron is obviously a lot better than 3.5 with LeBron, even though he is quite overrated and not as good anymore. And just to quickly clarify this, I'm someone who will argue that LeBron is better than Michael Jordan for his career. I think it's very, very close, but I'm not a LeBron.
Sorry, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. We couldn't hear you on that last thing. But anyway, move on.
I just wanted to say that to show I'm not a LeBron hater. I think he's arguably the greatest player ever. It's just this version of him at this stage of his career is no longer great.
Yes, we're on the same page there. I'm not sure. I mean, LeBron's in the top 2. To me, that's all time. That's not an argument. But we're not betting. The betting games that we're looking at right now have nothing to do with legacy. Have nothing to do with how many championships or how he looked against Berea against the Mavs in that finals. For all the LeBron haters out there, I had to remind everybody of that. So we're talking about what is he like today? What's his impact on the spread? So we like Spurs plus 3.5. We like it a little more if LeBron's out, and potentially might be adding something on depending on how things go.
Right. So if LeBron ends up in, the line could get up to plus 4, and it might be worth waiting around. I'm a little uncertain on how the line is going to move, but I think there's value on the Spurs regardless of situation. Okay.
All right. I think we've talked enough about the joy of betting on the team that's 1-9 in their last 10 games. So let's go Spurs. Let's cover that 3.5 for us tonight. And let's move on to Philly, Orlando. There's some interesting situation tonight. So what are you seeing there? Public still maybe undervaluing the Sixers, even in their somewhat depleted state. What are you liking for tonight?
So this is not a public one. This game and then the Boston game are a bit strange. The public appears to be on the Philly side. I'm using the data from Action Network. I think they're compiling from multiple sports books. I will say the earlier in the day it is, the less important the public betting splits are because it's based on a smaller sample size and lower volume of bets. So the public betting may shift here later in the day. They may have only tracked a couple hundred bets so far, and the splits may just be totally irrelevant right now.
Gotcha. All right. And for those that aren't as familiar either with in general with the concept, and then what Matt's referring to here is in general, not across the board, not 100%, but in general, you want to be betting not what the public's saying. Generally, the public is bad. That's why the books are in business. And if you can fade what the public's saying, that's generally a good strategy, but not always. If you do want to see what's the public betting, as Matt mentioned, Action Network will show you, and they'll have what the percent of tickets bet is and what the percent of dollars bets is. So generally, if you see a high percentage on tickets, but low percentage on money, that means that the sharps are betting against what the public's saying. So there's more people, the average bettor, they're betting one way, but if the big money is coming in on less tickets, that means the sharps are going the opposite way. So it's just something to look at, and you can see that on Action Network. Unabated shows it pretty well also. But anyway, so given that where things stand now in terms of the public being on Philly, we still like Philly tonight, right?
Yeah. So this is another one that I bet Wednesday night when the line first opened. And the reason I bet it really early is because I was hoping Embiid would play. I knew it was unlikely, but I thought there was massive upside if Embiid wound up being okay for this game. He's already been
Okay.
ruled out.
Right.
But as of Wednesday night, it was probably 80-20 he was going to be out, but there was a chance he'd be back. So I just wanted to get some in just in case, because
Okay.
Philly would be like -4 in this game, at least if Embiid was playing. Um,
Right.
so as it stands, there's no Embiid. So what we saw was Philly opened at +3, and with no news moved to +2. Um, and then we got around the same time Embiid listed out and Paolo Banchero upgraded to probable. I guess he went through a practice yesterday. So he's going to be in and Embiid's going to be out. And we saw the line go back up actually past the opening number to -3.5 on the Orlando side.
Okay. Yeah, that is strange.
But since then, it's actually back down to +2.5, and I see a couple +2s. I think FanDuel has +2, PointsBet is +2. So maybe what's happening is just there was an overreaction to news that was pushing the line towards Orlando, an overreaction to Embiid being out, who was probably going to be out anyway, an overreaction to Banchero being in, who was probably going to be in anyway. Like those things were kind of known already. And now Wendell Carter Jr. is questionable, and without Banchero, he's probably the second best player on the Magic. It's probably Franz Wagner and then Carter after Banchero, or I don't know. Those are the three main important players on that team. So I think it's just like people are getting confused and tied up in the news, and it's keeping the line shaded a little towards Orlando. And I think by the end of the day, the public betting splits won't look at all like what I'm referencing now.
Gotcha. All right. So if somebody wants to jump in now, you think Philly +2.5 is a good bet
Yeah.
right now? Okay.
Yeah, but I think it looks a lot better if Carter's out.
Okay.
So timing that could be worth doing. I like it regardless, but this could be similar to the LeBron thing where, like, if we get Carter ruled in, there might be a +3 or 3.5 available later.
Gotcha.
And if he's ruled out, it probably gets close to pick him. So this is, again, the situation of, are you around today? Like, people are off work, maybe. If you can wait for the Wendell Carter news, maybe you can optimize for the best Philly number. But I think the Sixers are a good bet, regardless of what happens.
Gotcha. All right. So if you don't think you're hanging around your computer all day, +2.5 looks like a way to go, folks. And if you can time it, keep an eye on the news, and maybe you can get even another half a point or possibly full point, depending on what's happening. All right. Anything else on Philly Orlando, or are we ready to move on to next game of interest?
I think we can move on to the next game, and we have an interesting one with the Knicks, but I want to go down to the Boston-Sacramento game, just because it has a similar thing going on with the public betting stuff as, the Orlando-Philly game we just talked about. So we'll just let's scroll down here. All right. So we have lines that look like they're around -7.5 and -8 for Boston, and we have a projected line at 10.
Okay.
The first thing to say is I'm a little gun shy right now on betting large favorites, just because of that Denver-Detroit game, but that should not be a relevant concern. That's just, that's the first thing that pops into my head is, oh no, not this again.
Right.
But we should throw out that concern. What I'm actually more concerned about is that I still may be underrating Sacramento.
Okay.
We have them basically still as a league average team. I'm giving them 1 point of a manual bump just because I might be underrating them. Like, that's just an adjustment for that. The -1 you see there next to Boston is like the garbage time backdoor cover thing. That's just your typical, like, we got to scale back how much they should win by, because being 11 points better than a team might only equate to a 9 or 10 point win if the starters are not on the court at the end of the game.
Gotcha.
So we've got the late game potential, like, playing time thing accounted for. We've got a small adjustment for Sacramento possibly being better than we think, and still it looks like Boston is a bet. The public, and I'll give this caveat again, as of now, appears to be on the Celtics. But the thing that is more worrisome than the Philly-Orlando game is that the betting line is actually moving towards the Kings.
Okay.
If you had asked me before I looked at any betting splits, though, my hunch would have been the public likes the Kings. And it may just be too early in the day to use the public betting information. It may not be reliable. Because, right, the Kings are everyone's favorite team. Even after losing in Atlanta, I don't think that's done much to change that. They came in on a back-to-back after it.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised to see a line this big, given how much recent hype there's been for the Kings, and I'm not even as you just mentioned. I'm not sure it's hype. I mean, they look good. They're saying that they're still the number 2 offense. The defense is climbing a little bit. You know, this could just be a really good team. This could be the version of Fox that Sacramento's always hoped for. Sabonis might be the right guy there.
But on the individual level, they don't have a great roster. If you look at these players individually, Fox and Sabonis are low-level all-stars, right? Like, neither of them are amazing. Even these versions, or are you arguing they might be a little better?
I'm arguing both those players might be. I mean, what you just call them almost all-stars?
Low-level all-stars, like just good enough to make the all-star game.
Yeah, no, I mean that's probably where they are. But it seems like they're in a system that's working for them. Fox is fast enough, and that whole team is fast enough. They can play it at a fast pace. But Sabonis also is a matchup nightmare for a lot of other teams' bigs, that he can just go around them. Or if they put smaller players on him, he's one of the few players left in pro basketball 2022 that still knows how to post up, that you can actually throw it to him in the post, and he does well. I think I saw the stat. I think they're like 1.2 points per possession when he posts up. I keep watching them, but our model still likes the Celtics tonight. So
yep.
And there's nobody that's questionable right now. So right now, that's just if you're seeing -7 or even 7.5, you think that's worthwhile because you think the fair line should be -10 based on what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, -10 looks like the fair line. So I was just kind of scanning over here the rest of the Kings roster because I think focusing on Fox and Sabonis does make sense. But the Kings only have, by 538, 4 players rated better than average. So
I assume Harrison Barnes is one of those. He's not rated as average.
He's just a classic guy that looks better than he is. I mean, he may be. Are we really trying to say like Harrison Barnes is in this late in his career taking a step forward? Because he's just been an average player basically his whole career. He's like he's a guy who doesn't shoot a lot. He doesn't shoot the 3 that well. He shoots a lot of mid-range jumpers. He's a mediocre defender. He's not a great passer.
I guess the reason I was surprised with it was when he's looked at as a number 2 or number 3 option, yeah, he's going to be below average. On this team, I feel like he's the 4th or 5th option. And at that level, I would assume that he would be a plus, a net plus.
Well, it doesn't change his individual rating. So what we're talking about is kind of the synergy here. But he's shooting 29% from 3 this year. His career average is 37.7. So he's actually kind of having a down year shooting the 3. But he generally is an average to slightly above average 3-point shooter. But he doesn't shoot that many of them. And he shoots like 4 a game. And then he's a decent mid-range option, but like he's not a great passer. He doesn't rebound that well. He doesn't play great defense. Like this is a 5th, 6th best player on a team.
Gotcha. So who are the other 2? Is Davion Mitchell one of them?
No, so Terrence Davis is actually probably not getting the minutes he deserves. The 3rd best player on the team is Kevin Huerter.
Right.
So if Fox and Sabonis and Huerter are all good, but there's no way these guys are going to like compete with other trios of great players in the league. Like they're not Tatum, Brown, and Horford, or pick your 3 Celtics. I actually think Derek White belongs in that category, but they're nowhere close to that. They're nowhere close to Giannis, Drew, and Middleton. in terms of their individual playing. So far this year, they've played probably better than any trio. So they're just kind of meshing really well together. So what I'll say about that part of it is they're running a system that teams are going to be scouting. And when you have I think overall, like across all sports, when you have players that are meshing really well together in a new system that are all playing better than they've ever played in their careers, the opponents are going to do a lot of work to look at the film of how they're doing it.
Sure.
And because the individual talent levels are not at the high, I mean, I think these guys are all good players and arguably even like borderline great players, but they're not elite players. And teams are going to start scheming against what they've been doing well. And I don't think the raw talent is high enough that they can just pivot to, a counter move and do something new that they're not currently doing now. When teams start to, hedge up and like cheat against the Kevin Huerter coming off dribble handoff thing, or put more like physical pressure on De'Aaron Fox, and like we'll see if Marcus Smart and Derek White can do that. Dylan Brooks did it really, really well in the fourth quarter of the Memphis-Sacramento game. Like, we may see more of, like, those sort of schematic adjustments. I don't think the Kings have enough talent to just pick, like, a counter move and run a new kind of offense.
Fair. Yeah,
and I think the same is true for Utah, right? Like, as teams start to figure out Utah a little more, they're going to look more and more like an average team. And I think the same is true for Sacramento.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah, we were looking at this chart earlier this morning where, looking at Herter's effective field goal percentage is just ridiculous this so far. Higher than Steph. Obviously, Steph has bigger volume, which is why he's further off to the over, I guess, my left shoulder here from this Kirk Goldsberry chart. So, yeah, Herter's probably overperforming, or maybe this is just the right team for him. So
I think it's both. I think it's definitely both.
Yeah. So, all right. So for tonight, again, if you're looking to get something down now, we do think there's good value on Celtics if you can find it at minus 7, certainly even at minus 7.5.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is a 7 right now. The last thing on this, I think this game really, really closely resembles the Memphis-Oklahoma City game we had last week, where Shea was coming into that game on a crazy run. And it was kind of like the Shea versus Ja game. And, everyone kind of wants to root for that game to be close because those are the two stars. I mean, Shea has cooled off since then, but coming into that game, he had been on a run of like 6 or 7 of the best games of his career in a row. And we had Memphis as a mid-sized favorite being undervalued because there was too much hype around Oklahoma City.
Right.
They just had that crazy win against the Knicks. And what we saw there was, the reason it connects to this one, the line opened at Memphis minus 6 for that game, dropped to 5.5, and then bounced back up to 6.5. So we had the public kind of like betting it down. And then I think some sharps came in and bet it back up. They were kind of waiting for the lowest possible number. And I think that's exactly the same here for a slightly different reason. These are the number 1 and 2 offenses in the NBA so far this year. I think that narrative will fuel people to be like, oh, this should be a close game, and want to bet Sacramento at +8, +7.5. Maybe we get it down to 7, and then I think we see the line go back up. I think the public, regardless of what it looks like right now on the betting splits, I think the public is going to be on Sacramento today. Maybe the data is less reliable this morning because it's the post-Thanksgiving haze and we don't have people betting yet.
Everybody's recovering from the tryptophans, sleeping in late. So we'll see what the sharps are doing later in the day. One other thing before we leave this game, similar to on Wednesday's show, we talked about Tatum potentially seeing a statement game for MVP as he was going against Doncic, and he crushed his overs on PRA, points, rebounds, assists. I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm going to be looking at the same thing. I see the Celtics overall and Tatum taking this as another statement game. All right, so this is the new hot team everybody's talking about. I see Tatum stepping up again and saying, just reminding people who he is and what this team is. So we'll see where the line comes in at. It was 38.5 on Wednesday, and he crushed that, I think, early in the third quarter. But that could be another spot to look at as well as the day moves on.
Yeah, I tend to be very anti-narrative, but when you mentioned Tatum versus Dallas, I remember having zero problem with that. Like, I didn't give a counter or devil's advocate. Like, that sounded logical, but he was playing directly against Luka. I think this is more Boston as a team could be like, let's get rid of these guys.
Agreed. And then even though I tend not, I don't usually let narrative drive it. I still like to look at the projections. Both Stochastic and Establish the Run had Tatum projected above 38.5.
Okay.
So that would look good. I haven't seen what the line is yet. I haven't. ETR still doesn't put their projections out till 5 p.m. So it's Stochastic in the morning and then ETR in the afternoon.
Gotcha.
But if both of those are above what the line is, I'll probably sprinkle something on that as well.
Yeah, I think if it's 38.5 again, that would be pretty awesome. Sacramento is a lot worse defensively than Dallas and plays a lot faster than Dallas. It should be a much better game environment for him.
Agreed. All right. Anything else, Sacramento, Boston, or time to move on to the next game?
I think we can move on.
Okay. All right. Which game do you think has the best betting value left?
Let's go down here to Denver versus the Clippers.
Okay.
Okay, so Denver's rating as a team, I just want to check. I'm checking over here on my other screen. Denver's team rating has gone up, and it might be... I think we're going to have to see less DeAndre Jordan. Maybe this is what's going on. Like, he has been so horrendous. Like, they have to know this, right? And the thing I want to check also is how many minutes he played in the OKC game, where Jokic played the second leg of the back-to-back after our dreaded Detroit loss. Like, they can just go small with their second unit.
Mm-hmm.
So if they start to do that, the team is going to perform a lot better. Because this Denver rating, the team rating I have here at 7.3, is at least a point higher than what it was when they played the Pistons.
Okay.
And I think that could be because of a lower minutes projection for DeAndre Jordan, who's projected right now at 6 minutes. DeAndre was a DNP coach's decision against the Thunder, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be. They're watching film. They're seeing what's happening. Yep. I got to believe they're thinking of, even just doing one of the 5 out lineups and just keeping, even if they go super small when Jokic is out, and they just go with the 5 out, keep Jordan off the floor. How much worse could it be? Literally, how much worse could it be if for really any lineup?
It can't be. It can't be. It has to be better. It's not even that.
Right.
It will be dramatically better no matter what. But they actually put a new player in the rotation who I'm not sure if he's actually good, but Vlatko Čančar played 35 minutes against the Thunder. I think he played 0 minutes against the Pistons. He has a player rating of -3, but he was really, really good in that game. He was a +6 off the bench. He had 19 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, 1 turnover. He shot 7 for 18. If he's just taking DeAndre's minutes,
right?
Sure, he's whatever. He's a below-average bench player, but he's a hell of a lot better than DeAndre Jordan. So if we just flip those two guys, I think it looks fine. So
how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah, right. So Denver is a better team now just by benching DeAndre Jordan and not having him play his 12 to 14 minutes.
Right. Playing a guy named Vlatko Čančar. So we're there. All right. So for this game, is this a bet, and at what spread is it a bet for you? If you can find, what are you looking?
So this looks really good at -3.5. I mean, the projected line is almost 8.
Okay.
We have an injury designation for Michael Porter Jr., who he's only a little bit above average right now in his player rating, but Denver doesn't have a great bench. Like, even with benching DeAndre Jordan, the backup forwards they have, like Christian Braun and Čančar, and I think Jeff Green may be healthy now. Maybe not. Zavon Reed. They don't have Bones Highland, so the bench is a little thin. Michael Porter Jr. is like a 1.5 to a 2-point impact right now.
Gotcha.
So if he gets ruled out, he's questionable with a heel injury and didn't play against OKC. If he gets ruled out, we'll see the projected line go to like -6, and we could see the real line fall to like 2.5.
Gotcha. All right. So right now you have it with him in. That's 7.8. So if Porter's in, we're saying the fair line is almost -8. And I'm seeing on Bovada right now -3.5.
Yeah.
So that one certainly seems actionable.
So this is very similar to like the Philly game and to the Spurs game, where there's one potential injury news that there's one guy to monitor, and if you can time it around that, great. but if you can't, it's still a bet either way.
Gotcha. So let's say for those that are hanging around their computer or feel like they can act, if Porter is marked out, what's the actionable bet? What are you looking for as a line to then do something additional?
So I'm just waiting to see how low the line can get in that case. Hopefully there's a -2 or something.
Okay.
I would guess, though, it only falls to like 3 or 2.5. And then, yeah, it's basically whatever the lowest number you can get on Denver is, that is the number I want.
Gotcha.
And if he's ruled in, I would just take the 3.5 because it'll probably go up a bit.
Okay. All right. So anything 3.5 -3.5 or better for Denver, either now, and then and even if Porter's out, -3.5 is fine. But maybe if Porter's out, it drops some, and then you can get a little extra value.
And if you miss all of the news, this is a 10:30 game. If you check in at 10:15 and Porter is in and the line is 4.5, something like that, I still like it. Like, you haven't optimized if that's what you've done, but the Clippers being without George and Kawhi, who I don't think we have full confirmation they are out today, but it's like 99%.
Right.
They're both listed out right now. I think monitoring maybe a surprise return for one of them is worth doing, but whatever. I think it's really, really unlikely those guys play. The books are undervaluing the impact of those two players because someone like John Wall and someone like Norman Powell and Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris, they seem like good players. They benefit so much from being on the court with the gravity of George and Leonard and the passing ability. They're not great players. They're all rated negative. So this Clippers team, I think, when they're missing those two guys, George and Kawhi, they tend to be overrated because I think there's not enough of a move for how good George and Kawhi are.
Gotcha. All right, well, that makes sense that, again, we're saying the line should be -8. You can find 3.5 right now just about anywhere. So this one looks like a lot of value on Denver, unless there's some surprise Kawhi coming out of the depths to somehow make an appearance on the court, as he likes to do once every 3 months or so.
I just want to check what the Clippers' next game is because, well, they don't play tomorrow, but they do have a home game in 2 nights. Again, I don't think this is like, they're not doing load management here. This is not like trying to set them up for a more important game. I think Kawhi and George are just both dealing with injuries, and the Clippers have championship aspirations. They might be very foolish to think they're good enough for that, but they have championship aspirations, and they don't want to compromise Kawhi's health. They don't want to compromise. It's a hamstring for Paul George, and that's the kind of thing where you re-aggravate that, and you could be out for quite a while. So they're just being very cautious with both players.
Makes sense. Looks like a good night to get some money on Denver. All right. Any other games that you think are worth talking about for people that are looking to get action in today? Any other value that's anything close to what we just talked about there for Denver?
So this is not a value game, but I do want to talk about it just for a second with Memphis and New Orleans. I think I have it on. We've got it on the screen? Okay. So I beat the current line on Philly, San Antonio, and Denver. I got a little bit at -2.5. The one game where I messed up, though, is betting Memphis when CJ McCollum got ruled out because it looks like there's an overreaction to that because New Orleans is actually a better rated team without CJ McCollum.
Interesting. Okay.
Because Jose Alvarado is the highest rated player on the Pelicans.
Okay.
So
I'd be curious to see if that translates over larger minutes because Alvarado, I agree, Alvarado's a positive player, but he's also one of those guys that he's never played, like he's coming in spurts. So he's, the impact that a guy like that can have sometimes doesn't translate over a full game. But anyway, it is what it is. So, all right, so now you have a bet that you're not that thrilled with. Are you looking to cash out? Are you looking to do something on the other side, or are you going to ride with it?
So first on Alvarado, the other part of why McCollum is not that important is Devontae Graham is actually a good player too. They have 2 backups for McCollum that are more than competent. Mm-hmm. So we can just say it's close to negligible. The other night for the Pelicans-Spurs game, we were on the Spurs regardless, but when McCollum got ruled out, the projected line for the game didn't really move. The actual line moved like a point or two, but The projected line, I think, moved half a point.
Got it.
So just wanted to note that. And then, yeah, as far as what I'm going to do here, like, I have a -1.5, and now it's plus. Like, I could just bet the +2.5 and hope for the miraculous outcome of Memphis winning by exactly 2. What I tend to do, though, is just bet the alt line. So I'll just take +1.5 at +110 or something, and then it'll just cancel out the bet that I already made, and then I just have no rooting interest. It just totally cancels it, and then I don't have to think about the game anymore. That is a psychological thing, though. There's no right answer for this.
Okay.
You could also argue that with a line projected at 1.7, New Orleans +2.5 is a negative EV bet because 0.8 is not enough of a differential to cover the VIG. And what you'd be doing by hedging is compounding a minus EV bet with another minus EV bet. And the argument there could just do nothing. Just let it ride, whatever. Like, sometimes you don't get the best bet. So I think there's a case for both things.
Okay. Fair enough.
I don't know what I'll do yet. If Memphis gets up to like -3 or 3.5, I'll be much more inclined to hedge it. I'll probably just wait and see how the line moves.
Okay.
But yeah, as far as like actionable things there for everyone else, there's nothing going on. Like, this line just looks pretty close to fair.
Gotcha. I'm just looking at the sheet to see if there's anything else. I mean, if we get Beal news, does the Washington game become bettable, or is it, you think there's already enough baked in there?
Why can't I find that game?
It's right there at the bottom.
Go. Okay. What is the line there? Is Miami -3 right now? 3.5? -3. Yeah, I think Beal getting ruled out with Hero in is enough to make Miami maybe a small bet.
Okay.
The reverse is also true. I think if Hero is ruled out and Beal is in, Washington is a semi-decent bet. Because Tyler Hero, I think he's actually an interesting player to just talk about for 5 seconds, because there was a lot made of how bad he was in the Boston series last year. He was playing hurt, and he was having a great year for like the first 3 quarters of the season. He won 6th Man of the Year pretty easily. Tyler Hero is pretty good, and he's also young and probably getting better. But the reason he matters more right now is because Jimmy Butler is out.
With Butler out, he's the offense.
Yeah. I mean, Kyle Lowry has been unbelievable lately, but as far as like creating your own shot off the dribble, Hero is more of that guy. And then I don't have Gabe Vincent listed here. He's questionable too. He's not worth much in a context where Lowry and Hero are both available, but there is a compounding effect if you don't have Hero and then you don't have Vincent. With Duncan Robinson also already out. Like, Miami gets really thin really fast if they're missing multiple guys. So I think there's a scenario here where Washington is a good bet, and I think there's a scenario where Miami is a good bet.
All right. How do you feel about the game total? Like, if they're both out, what does that do? Does that make the under really attractive, or is it already is that baked in? I'm looking to see what they're showing.
We're uniquely positioned to answer this because these teams just played against each other 2 days ago. So for that game, I had actually bet some Washington team total under stuff that did not do well because Beal was out. The actual game total went from 211 to about 208 with Beal ruled out. And the trend continued. Every time that I bet an under with Bradley Beal ruled out, I lose. Every time. I don't know why. I mean, the game seemed pretty up-tempo. I don't know. Maybe the pace increases without Beal for some weird reason. Kyle Kuzma just starts like running the offense at not efficiently, but just at a higher tempo than before. So I'm very much inclined to just ignore the total here. But if Beal and Hero are both out, I like the under for sure. Okay. Hero matters for the total probably more than Beal.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. I think that covers what we're looking at for today. Was there anything else worth mentioning, or do you think we've covered where the value is?
I think we've covered it. Do you have anything else? I'm just kind of scanning through these games. Yep. There's nothing really popping up here.
Gotcha. All right. So, a few things to be taken a look at to recap the game. I think we like the best is Denver. If you can get that at -3.5. The Spurs, we were liking at plus 3.5. Those are the main ones, and then a few other things just to keep an eye on
Yeah.
as the day goes by. So, Matt, thanks. We will be back tomorrow, 10 a.m., and hopefully recapping a positive Friday for us, and then queuing up what we've got for Saturday. Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.